The stars of the fifth galactic sector shimmered with a serenity that belied the delicate balance of power that held the region together. It was a hub of interstellar trade, home to over 100 species that coexisted under the watchful eye of the Galactic Coalition. Ships of every conceivable design flitted between orbital stations, their hulls glinting against the backdrop of nebulae painted in hues of violet and gold. Among these, the station known as Harmon's Reach was the sector's crown jewel, a bustling nexus of diplomacy, commerce, and military oversight. Commander Ilvrin Sirax stood at the panoramic viewport of the station's command deck, his dark, multifaceted eyes reflecting the swirling nebula. A member of the Thalzari, a species known for their precision and stoic demeanor, Sirax exuded an air of quiet authority. His uniform, a sleek amalgam of form and function, bore the insignia of the Coalition Defense Fleet. Around him, officers of various species moved with purpose, their voices blending into a low hum of controlled chaos. The day had begun like any other, with reports of minor trade disputes and the occasional skirmish at the sector's fringes. But then the alert came. The deep, resonant chime of the station's alarm system silenced the command deck, followed by a single, chilling announcement from the station's AI. Unidentified vessel detected. Classification: human warship. Entering the sector. A murmur spread through the room, tinged with disbelief and unease. Humanity was a name that carried weight even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Known for their rapid technological advancement and unyielding tenacity, they were a species both admired and feared. Their warships, rare as they were, had a reputation for being engines of destruction, capable of reducing fleets to debris in moments. "Confirm the readings," Sirax ordered, his voice calm but firm. An officer, a slender Alvarine with translucent skin that shimmered under the station's lights, tapped feverishly at their console. "Readings confirm, Commander. The vessel is of human origin. Energy signatures suggest advanced weaponry, and shielding far beyond standard Coalition specifications." Sirax's mandibles clicked softly, a Thalzari sign of unease. "Any attempts at communication? None so far. They're holding position at the sector's outer boundary, just beyond our patrol routes." The room fell into a tense silence. The Coalition had long avoided direct conflict with humanity, preferring to maintain a tenuous peace through diplomacy and distance. But a human warship entering Coalition-controlled space without notice was a provocation that could not be ignored. "Prepare a diplomatic envoy," Sirax commanded, "and alert the patrol fleet. I want them on standby, but under no circumstances are they to engage. We cannot afford to escalate the situation without cause." As the officers moved to carry out his orders, Sirax turned his attention back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, beyond the shimmering edge of the nebula, a human warship waited. But why? At that moment, another voice cut through the tension, sharp and resolute. "Commander, if I may?" Sirax turned to see Captain Lyra Venn, the station's diplomatic liaison, a Calarian with an imposing stature and eyes that gleamed like molten silver. Lyra was known for her ability to navigate even the most volatile situations. She stepped forward, her movements graceful despite the weight of the ceremonial blade strapped to her side, a Calarian tradition symbolizing honor and duty. "We need to approach this carefully," she said. "Humanity's actions are rarely without purpose. If they've entered our sector, they're either desperate or confident enough to face the consequences. Either way, we need to understand their intentions before making a move." Sirax nodded, appreciating her pragmatism. "Agreed. I'll need you to lead the envoy. Your experience with delicate negotiations will be invaluable." Lyra's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then she inclined her head. "I'll do what I can, but I'll need time to prepare. Humanity's cultural nuances are complicated." Before Sirax could respond, the Alvarine officer interrupted. "Commander, new data incoming. The vessel has begun transmitting a signal. It's not a direct communication, more like a beacon. Decoding now." The tension in the room thickened as the seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, the officer looked up, their translucent skin now tinged with a faint blue, a sign of stress. The signal is encoded with an ancient coalition distress protocol. It's broadcasting on a frequency that predates humanity's entry into space. But the origin is clear. It's human. Sirax felt a chill run through him. A distress signal? From a warship capable of obliterating entire fleets? The contradiction was unsettling. "Relay the signal to my console," Sirax ordered. The text appeared before him in glowing characters. The message brief but laden with implication. "To the Coalition, we seek no conflict. The enemy is already here." The words hung in the air like a specter, their meaning both ambiguous and foreboding. Who was this enemy? And why had a human warship, of all things, come to deliver such a cryptic warning? Lyra stepped closer, her voice low. "This changes things. If their claim is true, we may be facing a threat far greater than a single warship. But we need answers, and quickly." Sirax's mandibles clicked again, this time with determination. "Prepare the envoy, and double the patrols around Harmon's Reach. If there's an enemy in our sector, I want to know exactly who or what we're dealing with." As the officer scrambled to execute his orders, Sirax allowed himself a moment to reflect. The arrival of the human warship had upended the fragile equilibrium of the sector, and the message it carried hinted at dangers yet unseen. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. The peaceful stars of the Fifth Galactic Sector would not remain so for long. The void between stars held a stillness that defied imagination, vast and infinite, yet strangely intimate under the watchful gaze of those who traversed it. Harmon's Reach hummed with barely restrained energy as the Coalition's patrol fleet surged forward in a coordinated formation, sleek vessels gliding through the darkness like silver blades. At the center of it all, Commander Sirax monitored the unfolding operation from the command deck, his posture rigid and unyielding. The human warship loomed on the edge of the tactical display like a specter of inevitability. Its hull was matte black, absorbing the faint starlight rather than reflecting it, a deliberate design to render both ominous and elusive. Strange angular protrusions hinted at weapon systems unlike anything Sirax had ever encountered. Even without firing a single shot, the vessel radiated an aura of quiet menace. "Distance to target?" Sirax asked, his voice sharp. 20,000 units in closing," reported Lieutenant Vexa, an Alvarine officer whose nimble fingers danced across the console. Their trajectory remained steady, no deviations. Captain Lyra Ven stood at Sirax's side, her expression unreadable. "They're making no attempt to evade us," she observed. "Bold, considering they're outnumbered. Or confident," Sirax replied grimly. "Either way, we need answers." The comms officer, a wiry Trillian with bioluminescent markings that pulsed in sync with his rising anxiety, turned from his station. "Still no response to our hails, Commander. They're maintaining radio silence." Sirax's mandibles clicked softly. "Keep trying. We need to establish contact before this escalates." As the fleet continued its approach, the tension aboard the command deck thickened like a storm gathering strength. The Coalition ships fanned out in a crescent formation, their energy shields shimmering faintly against the void. Weapon systems were primed but not yet locked, a delicate balance between readiness and restraint. The human warship, however, remained eerily still. No sudden maneuvers, no visible signs of hostility, only that steady, inexorable glide through space. It was a predator moving with the confidence of something that had never known fear. "Commander," Vexa spoke up, her voice tight with urgency, "we're detecting a power surge from the human vessel. It's unlike anything in our database." Sirax felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Specify." "It's not a weapon charge, but it's massive. If I had to guess," she paused, her translucent skin darkening with uncertainty, "it's a shield amplification or a defensive system we don't understand." Before Sirax could respond, The tactical display flickered, and a sudden burst of static crackled through the comms. The human vessel had finally spoken, not with words but with raw data streams that overwhelmed the coalition systems. "Cut through the interference," Syrax commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Get me a clean signal." Lyra leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "They're not just jamming us. They're broadcasting something, an encoded message. Decrypt it," Syrax ordered. Fast. As technicians scrambled to decipher the transmission, the human ship made its first significant move. Engines flared to life, sending the vessel into a slow, deliberate arc that positioned it directly in front of the coalition fleet. For a moment, it hung there like a leviathan rising from the depths, silent and imposing. "Commander," the comms officer finally announced, his voice shaky, message decoded. The transmission played across the deck speakers, a deep, resonant voice speaking in flawless coalition standard. "We seek no war. Stand down, or we will be forced to defend ourselves." The stark simplicity of the message sent a chill through the room. Syrax's mandibles clicked softly as he processed the implications. The humans hadn't come here by accident. They were issuing a warning, not a plea. Lyra's voice was steady but edged with tension. That wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Syrax nodded grimly. "And we're the ones standing in their way." Before he could issue further orders, proximity alarms blared across the command deck. Multiple signatures inbound. Vexa reported. Not coalition, unknown configuration. Syrax's eyes narrowed. On screen, the tactical display shifted to reveal a cluster of vessels emerging from a hidden fold in space. Their designs were jagged and chaotic, exuding an aggressive energy that spoke of violence and disorder. Lyra's jaw tightened. Rogue faction ships. They've been lying in wait. Syrax's mind raced. The human message now made perfect sense. They hadn't come as aggressors but as forewarners. And now the threat had revealed itself. All ships, defensive positions. Syrax barked. Prepare to engage. As coalition vessels moved into formation, the human warship acted with a precision that bordered on the uncanny. Its engines roared, propelling it into the fray with lethal grace. Energy pulses rippled along its hull, and weapon systems that had remained dormant now came to life with devastating force. Syrax watched in stunned disbelief as the human vessel unleashed a barrage of firepower unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Beams of coherent light sliced through rogue ships with surgical precision, while defensive countermeasures neutralized incoming projectiles with effortless efficiency. "They're not just holding their own," Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. "They're dominating." Syrax's mandibles clicked once more, this time with a mixture of respect and determination. "Signal all ships. Assist the human vessel. We'll drive these rogues out together." As the coalition fleet surged forward, Syrax felt a strange certainty settle over him. The arrival of the human warship had upended the sector's fragile equilibrium, but it had also revealed a truth he could no longer ignore. Humanity was not the enemy. The battle had only just begun, but Syrax knew this encounter would mark the start of something far greater than a mere skirmish. And as the stars blazed with the fire of conflict, he resolved to see it through to the end. The vacuum of space, vast and indifferent, bore silent witness to the standoff unfolding at the edge of the fifth galactic sector. Wreckage from the recent battle drifted aimlessly, twisted shards of rogue ships glinting faintly against the backdrop of distant stars. Coalition vessels maintained tight defensive formations, their hulls scorched but intact. At the center of it all, the human warship remained ominously still, its dark surface unmarred despite the ferocity of the engagement. Commander Syrax stood rigid at the command deck of Harmon's Reach, every instinct urging caution. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but tension still hung heavy in the air. The human vessel had demonstrated unmatched firepower, dismantling the rogue fleet with chilling precision. Now it hovered like a sentinel, silent and unreadable, its intentions cloaked in ambiguity. Their holding position, Lieutenant Vexa reported, her translucent skin shimmering with residual anxiety. No additional hostile movements detected. Syrax's multifaceted eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, and their energy levels still high, Vexa said grimly. Weapons remain primed. Captain Lyra then stood at Syrax's side, her molten silver eyes narrowed in contemplation. The scent of ozone lingered on her ceremonial blade, a remnant of its brief activation during the skirmish. They saved us, she said quietly. Without them, we wouldn't be standing here. Syrax's mandibles clicked softly, acknowledging the truth of her words. That doesn't mean we can afford to trust them. Lyra's gaze hardened. They had every opportunity to finish us off, yet they didn't. That's worth something. Before Syrax could respond, the comms officer spoke up, his bioluminescent markings flickering with urgency. Commander, incoming transmission from the human vessel. Put it through. The voice that filled the command deck was deep and steady, laced with an authority that demanded attention. This is Commander Elias Marlowe of the Terran defense ship Dauntless. We appreciate your assistance in repelling the rogue threat. However, I must insist, lower your weapons and allow a safe passage. We are not your enemy. Syrax exchanged a glance with Lyra. The human commander's tone was measured but resolute, offering no room for negotiation. Lyra's lips thinned. They're giving us an ultimatum. An unwise one, Syrax said, though doubt gnawed at him. The humans had proven formidable allies in the heat of battle, but their sudden demand for free passage was concerning. What lay beyond this request that Syrax couldn't yet see? He stepped closer to the comm station. This is Commander Syrax of the Galactic Coalition Defense Fleet. While we acknowledge your role in the recent engagement, your unauthorized entry into our sector remains a violation of Coalition law. State your purpose clearly, or we will have no choice but to maintain our defensive posture. There was a pause, a charged silence stretching thin between the two forces. When Marlowe spoke again, there was a subtle edge to his voice. We're here because your sector is under greater threat than you realize. The rogues you just encountered are the vanguard of something far worse. We've tracked their incursions across 3 systems, and unless we act quickly, this sector will be overrun. A murmur swept to the command deck. The idea that the recent attack had merely been a precursor to something larger was unsettling. Lyra folded her arms across her chest. If they're telling the truth, this could explain their aggressive entry. Desperation breeds boldness. Syrax wasn't convinced. Or it's a convenient story to justify their actions. Either way, we need more than vague warnings. He activated the comm again. If this threat is as dire as you claim, why didn't you contact the Coalition through proper channels? Marlowe's response was immediate. We tried. Your bureaucrats ignored us. Time ran out, and we couldn't wait for diplomatic formalities. Syrax's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Coalition's labyrinthine bureaucracy often hampered swift action, a weakness he had long despised. But even so, allowing foreign warships to enter sovereign space without consequence set a dangerous precedent. Your lack of protocol has placed us in a precarious position, Syrax said sharply. Trust is not given freely in these circumstances. Neither is survival, Marlowe shot back. We didn't come here to make friends, Commander. We came to keep this sector from burning. But if you want to waste time posturing, be my guest. Just remember, when the next wave hits, you'll wish you had us at your side. The words hung heavy in the air, charged with equal parts warning and challenge. Syrax felt the weight of command pressing down on him. His duty was to protect the Coalition, but the line between ally and threat had never felt so thin. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low but insistent. We need to make a decision. If they're right, every second we waste could cost lives. But if they're lying... Syrax, finish your thought grimly. We'll be handing them the keys to the sector. The tactical display continued to shimmer with the unresolved tension of the moment. Coalition ships held formation, their weapons locked but not yet fired. The Dauntless remained motionless, its formidable systems humming with restrained power. Syrax took a measured breath, his resolve hardening. Maintain defensive posture, but do not engage. I'll meet with Marlowe face to face. Lyra arched an eyebrow. Bold move. You think he'll agree? He doesn't have a choice, Syrax said flatly. If he's telling the truth, he'll want this resolved peacefully as much as we do. And if he's lying... He left the thought unfinished, but the meaning was clear. The coalition would be ready. As Syrax issued final orders and prepared for the confrontation, a sense of foreboding settled over the command deck. The stars outside gleamed cold and indifferent, their ancient light untouched by the turmoil unfolding below. The standoff was far from over, and Syrax knew that the decisions made in the next few moments would shape the fate of the entire sector. The only question that remained was whether humanity would stand as friend or foe. The shuttle hummed softly as it glided through the void, carrying Commander Syrax and his small escort toward the Terran warship Dauntless. The vessel loomed ahead, a shadow against the stars, its angular design stark and formidable. Coalition ships maintained their formation at a respectful distance, weapons still primed but held in check by uneasy restraint. Syrax stood rigid in the cramped confines of the shuttle, his posture embodying the weight of the decision he had made. His mandibles twitched as he replayed the human commander's warning in his mind, an ominous promise of an unseen threat bearing down on the sector. Was Marlowe a harbinger of salvation or destruction? The answer, Syrax knew, would be revealed soon enough. Lieutenant Vexa, seated at the navigation console, glanced back. Her expression betrayed a flicker of unease. "We're receiving docking clearance, Commander." They had deactivated their external defenses. Syrax nodded curtly. "Proceed." As the shuttle maneuvered into the docking bay, Syrax couldn't shake the sense of stepping into enemy territory despite the tentative truce. The Terran ship's interior was a study in functional elegance. Sleek panels of dark alloy interspersed with glowing data nodes that pulsed like living veins. Armed human personnel flanked the entrance, their expressions unreadable but disciplined. The airlock hissed open, revealing Commander Elias Marlowe waiting on the other side. He stood tall, his broad frame clad in a black uniform adorned with minimalist insignia. There was a steadiness to his gaze that spoke of experience hard-earned on countless battlefields. "Commander Syrax," Marlowe greeted, his voice steady but measured. "Welcome aboard the Dauntless." Syrax inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect tempered by caution. "Commander Marlowe." The two leaders sized each other up in a silence, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, Marlowe gestured toward a corridor lined with illuminated panels. "This way. We have much to discuss." They walked side by side, their entourages trailing behind like shadows. The hum of the ship's systems filled the void between them until Marlowe broke the silence. "I imagine you have questions," Marlowe said. "Many," Syrax replied bluntly. "Your arrival in this sector violated multiple coalition protocols, and your claims about an imminent threat remain unverified." Marlowe's expression hardened. "The threat is real, Commander. What you saw today was only the beginning. The rogues are being manipulated by a far more dangerous force, an entity that thrives on chaos and conquest. We've seen entire systems fall to them." Syrax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Why should I believe you?" "Because we've fought them before," Marlowe said grimly. "And we survived." "Barely." They entered a briefing chamber where holographic displays flickered to life, projecting star charts riddled with red markers, distress signals, destroyed outposts, and destabilized sectors. Marlowe keyed a command, zooming in on a cluster of systems near the coalition border. "This is what remains of the Callan Expanse," Marlowe explained. "A thriving trade hub reduced to ruin in less than a month. The same pattern is emerging here. The rogues are just a vanguard, testing your defenses. The real invasion is coming." Syrax studied the projections, his skepticism giving way to a growing sense of unease. The evidence was compelling, and Marlowe's demeanor suggested no hint of deceit. But the implications were staggering. if the humans were right. The coalition was woefully unprepared for what lay ahead. Lyra Ven's voice crackled through Syrax's comm unit. "Commander, are you seeing this? If their intel is accurate, we're standing on the edge of a sector-wide catastrophe." "I see it," Syrax responded tightly. "And I'm not sure I like what it means." Marlowe folded his arms across his chest. "We didn't come here to dictate terms, Syrax. We came to offer an alliance. We have the experience, the technology, and the tactics to fight this enemy, but we can't do it alone." Syrax's eyes narrowed. "And what does humanity gain from this alliance?" "Survival," Marlowe said without hesitation. "If the sector falls, it won't stop here. The enemy will push into Terran space next. We're fighting for our future as much as yours." The blunt honesty of the statement struck a chord in Syrax. Marlowe wasn't sugarcoating the stakes or hiding ulterior motives. He was laying it all bare, a rare and dangerous form of diplomacy. Syrax took a measured breath. "The coalition doesn't take alliances lightly. But given the evidence you presented, I'm willing to recommend a temporary strategic partnership." Marlowe inclined his head. "It's a start, under one condition," Syrax added sharply. "Command authority remains with the coalition. Your forces will operate under our directives." Marlowe's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Fair enough. As long as you're willing to listen to advice from those who've been in the trenches." Syrax allowed himself a rare flicker of amusement. "We'll see." The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a tentative understanding forged through necessity. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time since the encounter began, Syrax felt a glimmer of hope. As the holographic displays shifted to tactical schematics for joint operations, Syrax knew the war for the sector was far from over. But with humanity as an unexpected ally, they might just have a chance to survive the storm. And so, standing in the heart of the formidable Terran warship, Syrax resolved to fight alongside his new allies, not out of blind trust, but out of a shared determination to protect their worlds from the darkness looming on the horizon. The stars above the Fifth Galactic Sector gleamed cold and indifferent as the Coalition fleet and the Terran warship Dauntless maintained their coordinated orbit. The debris from the earlier battle had largely cleared, swept into containment fields or scattered by gravitational adjustments. Yet despite the quiet, the weight of what had transpired lingered heavily on Commander Syrax's shoulders. Back aboard the Harmon's Reach, Syrax stood at the viewport, his multifaceted eyes scanning the horizon where ships moved with precise, disciplined efficiency. Repairs were underway, hull breaches patched by automated drones, and life support systems stabilized. The ship, like its crew, bore scars from the battle, yet it endured. Captain Lyra Ven approached, her ceremonial blade sheathed but still radiating authority. "The preliminary agreement with the humans has been transmitted to Coalition Command," she reported. "They weren't pleased, but they've acknowledged the necessity." Syrax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Necessity has a way of forcing even the most stubborn bureaucrats to reconsider. Lyra's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Marlowe's people are already integrating into joint operations. I have to admit, they're efficient. Their tactical simulations have revealed weaknesses in our standard formations." Syrax's gaze remained fixed on the void. "We have much to learn from them, and they from us. But alliances forged in crisis are fragile. We'll need to tread carefully." A subtle vibration hummed through the deck as the Dauntless signaled its readiness to depart for the outer sectors, where rogue factions were rumored to regroup. Syrax knew the Terrans wouldn't linger long. Their mission extended beyond the Coalition's borders. "Do you trust him?" Lyra asked quietly, her molten silver eyes reflecting the distant starlight. Syrax considered the question carefully. "Marlowe is a soldier bound by duty, much like us. I trust his intentions, for now. But trust is a fragile commodity in times like these." Lyra nodded, understanding the delicate balance they now walked. Still, without them, we'd be nothing more than wreckage floating in the void. Syrax's mandibles clicked softly in agreement. "True. And that's a debt we cannot ignore. The comm unit on Syrax's wrist chirped, interrupting the moment. "Commander, this is Tactical Control," came Vex's voice. "The Dauntless is requesting final confirmation for departure." Syrax activated the link. "Acknowledged. Transmit clearance and extend our gratitude." "Aye, Commander," Vexa replied. As the transmission ended, Lyra spoke again, her tone more somber. "Do you think the threat Marlowe spoke of will reach us?" Syrax's gaze darkened. "It's already here. We just haven't seen the full extent of it yet." The revelation weighed heavily between them. The rogues had been more than just opportunistic marauders. They were the first wave of something far more insidious. The Coalition's survival would depend on its ability to adapt, to learn from unexpected allies, like the Terrans, and strengthen its defenses against an enemy still shrouded in shadow. "We'll be ready," Lyra said resolutely, as though reading his thoughts. "We have to be," Syrax replied grimly, "or there won't be a sector left to defend." The tactical display shifted, showing the Dauntless initiating its departure sequence. Engines flared to life, casting a pale blue glow across the void. For a moment, the warship seemed like nothing more than a flicker against a vast expanse of stars. Then it was gone, leaving only a faint distortion in its wake. Syrax exhaled slowly, the weight of recent events settling over him like a tangible force. "We've survived this day, but the war is far from over." Lyra inclined her head. "And when it comes, we'll be stronger for what we've learned." Syrax allowed himself a rare flicker of hope. "Let's ensure that we are." Together, they turned from the viewport, the echoes of conflict fading into the background. The sector had endured one threat, but far greater challenges lay ahead. Yet in that uncertain future, Syrax found a glimmer of possibility, not just for survival, but for a newfound strength forged through the bonds of hard-earned alliances. And as the stars gleamed cold and distant beyond the hull of the Harmon's reach, Syrax knew one unshakable truth. The fight for their future had only just begun.